All right, welcome back for part 2 of the random pattern cutting board series. If you didn't catch the first part, be sure to go back and check out this. In this segment of this 2-part series, we're gonna start finishing these boards, 12 that I had glued up previously. I'm getting everything set up right here. Got the planer set up, everything ready to go. Got my stack of boards over here. One sitting out right here, ready to go. Before I get into this, note I'm rocking the Hardwood Store of North Carolina t-shirt today. I'm a really big fan of those folks up there. They're really helpful, especially since I drive so far to get lumber up there. And no, they don't sponsor me. So just kidding there. But no, they're really good. Check them out. They're online. They're in Gibsonville, North Carolina. Before I get into actually starting work on these boards right here, I do want to throw a couple caveats in there, especially since we're planing in grain today. Now, I know there's a lot of folks out there that say, oh, you shouldn't do that. But yes and no, you shouldn't do it sometimes, but if you do it properly, it's perfectly safe, and it all depends on your equipment also. So I'm running a Powermatic 20-inch planer with a spiral cutter head in here. So if you're not familiar with those, this cutter head has 100 individual indexable carbide inserts. So it's really, every time it's spin, it's taking very small nicks out of everything. And when planing in grain, it's very important to go very, very shallow with the depths of cut. You take too much and you're gonna risk breakage, blowout, all kinds of stuff. Blowout is another issue. I mentioned before, is why these straight strips are glued onto the ends of the board. So when they go through the planer, since it's in grain and it's facing up, it doesn't blow out. Later on, I'll run one through the wrong way to show you what that blowout looks like and why these strips prevent that. So I wasn't too concerned with scraping excess glue off these boards when I glued them up. That's not going to be an issue. The first couple passes I do all these boards through there is going to be very shallow, just to remove the really high spots of glue. And since probably 95–96% of the time all I plane is hardwood, my infeed and outfeed rollers on my planer are sent pretty tense, so they're actually pressing down very hard. Causes a little bit of problem when I plane softwoods, but that's not much of a concern for me. I have them set really stiff so that they maintain tight hold of the board and keep them nice, pressed and flat. So we're gonna jump right into this. We're gonna start planing some of these, and I'll show you some of the things I talked about here in a few. So now we've got all these boards rough planed down to where we want them. But one of the things you've got to remember when planing in grain is, since the grain of the wood is facing upwards, is the deeper cut you do, and mind you, I'm only taking a fraction of a millimeter each time I do a pass. The issue you run into is some of the woods, depending on the grain structure, is some of those surface grains are actually going to pull out as it's cutting across. And what happens is you're left with these cavities in here where grain has been ripped out. And that's from taking a pretty hefty cut. Not really by normal planing standards, but for in grain. Very, very little to get a good finish. So here's a close-up right here of where I'm pointing. You can kind of see my finger in here where I'm pointing to. This is in some cherry, where there's some kind of cavities right there where the grain has pulled out of there. So we don't want that. One way to fix that without, one of the ways to do it is, an insane amount of sanding, but we don't want to do that. We have a lot of boards to finish. I have my drum sander, but I'm not going to use that in this project. I can do this with the planer. But what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do a few more passes on each side at a super, super shallow depth. And I'm talking, you know, on my wheel here, I don't remember what the conversion is. Each pass, I'm only rotating it about that much right there. You can kind of see right there. So you'll be able to hear it in the video. The blades are barely engaging. So what we're doing is we're taking a tiny, tiny little bit off the surface to prevent that pull out by being too aggressive. And we do a few passes and we'll see what it looks like here in just a second. All right, so as you can see here in the close-up, actually before I ran this through, I marked on the sides of this board where that section was I had shown. But as you can see here, we have a far superior surface finish. This is gonna save us an insane amount of time sanding down, because otherwise we would have to sand and sand and sand until we got down and got rid of those little nooks and crannies in it from the grain being pulled out. And in grain is insanely tough to sand as opposed to doing face or edge grain. So you can see there, that section right there, and same thing throughout that board. I did 4 or 5 super duper shallow passes right there. So I'm gonna get back to planing down the rest of these, and we'll get ready to move on to trimming them up and sanding all the rest of the steps. So we got all our boards planed down to where we want them, as acceptable of a finish as we want, because there's going to be a lot of sanding to go, even with as smooth as we got them. So we're going to jump back over to the table saw. The next step, what we're going to do, we're going to square up the sides. We're going to cut off the strips on the end that were there to prevent the blowout, and we're going to get them squared up, and then we're going to start with the process of rough sanding, edge sanding, getting ready to route the finger holds on the bottom, all that stuff. So we'll get to it.
So I usually let these soak in here in the mineral oil for 3 to 5 minutes, just to make sure they have time to absorb a good little bit into it, and then the rest once I pull them out of here and let them drain over here. All right, now we're starting to see the fruits of our labor here. As you can see, these boards here have been oiled, waxed, everything. They've had their badges and feet put on. I really like the colors in these, just 10 or 12 different types of wood that are in those. So fortunately I wanted to get this video out, but I still got 5 or 6 more to do back there. These are just the ones that I've finished already. So just remember, you know, like thin cuts that could be laminated into panels, just offcuts saved up over time can be turned into nice cutting boards, and these will last somebody many good years. So as always, if you like the video, give it a like, share with your friends, and until next time, have a good one.